Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the English Learning Podcast, your go-to place to improve your English step by step. I'm Jason, your host.
And I'm Julia, your co-host. Hi, everyone. Today, we're diving into a very important topic that can change the way you speak English, how to speak like a thinker, not a translator.
Exactly, Julia. Many English learners tend to translate everything from their native language into English in their head before they speak. But that can slow you down and make your speech sound unnatural.
Right, Jason. Imagine if you had to translate every word or sentence first. It's like having a delay in a conversation. But what if you could think directly in English like a native speaker does?
That's the key. Today, we'll talk about why thinking in English, not translating, helps you speak more naturally, faster, and with confidence.
And we'll share practical tips and examples to help you start thinking in English every day. So stay tuned and get ready to change your English learning game.
Let's get started. All right, Julia. Now that we've introduced the topic, let's dive into what it really means to speak like a thinker, not a translator.
Great. So, Jason, when people say speak like a thinker, they mean that instead of translating word for word from your native language to English, you start to think directly in English.
Exactly. Think of it this way. If you translate, you're like a bridge between two languages. You hear a sentence in your language, then you convert it into English before you say it.
Right. And that process can slow you down, sometimes confuse your meaning, or make your sentences sound awkward because the grammar and word order in your language might be very different from English.
On the other hand, thinking like a thinker means you let English form the ideas in your mind first. You don't try to translate a phrase, you just form the idea directly in English.
So instead of saying in your head, I want to go to the market, by translating word for word, you start to just think the idea itself in English. Your brain naturally picks the right words and grammar.
That's right. And this is how native speakers speak. They don't translate from another language. They simply think and speak in the language itself.
And that helps with fluency, speaking smoothly without long pauses, hesitation, or awkward phrasing.
Let's give an example. Imagine someone whose native language is Spanish. If they translate I'm hungry from Spanish yo tengo hambre, they might say I have hunger, which sounds unnatural in English.
But if they think directly in English, they just say I'm hungry, simple and natural.
Exactly. So, speaking like a thinker means learning to think and speak English in its own natural way. Not just converting phrases from your native language.
That's the difference. And over time, this approach helps your English sound more natural and your conversations become much easier.
All right, Julia. Now that we know what it means to speak like a thinker, let's talk about some common problems that many English learners face when they try to speak, but keep translating in their heads.
Yes, Jason. One big problem is slow speaking. When learners translate each word or sentence, it takes extra time, so they often pause a lot or speak very slowly.
Exactly. And these long pauses can make conversations feel unnatural or awkward. Sometimes learners lose their train of thought because they're busy trying to translate instead of just expressing the idea.
Another problem is making mistakes with grammar or word order. Because languages have different structures, direct translation can cause errors. For example, putting adjectives after nouns or using incorrect verb tenses.
Right? Like saying, I very like this, instead of, I really like this. That happens when people translate word for word, without thinking about how English works.
Also, learners sometimes use wrong vocabulary because they pick the closest translation instead of the word that fits best in English. This can confuse listeners.
And let's not forget feeling nervous or stuck during conversations. When you focus too much on translating, it's easy to get overwhelmed or lose confidence because the process feels slow and difficult.
Absolutely. And sometimes learners get frustrated and want to give up because speaking feels like a big challenge.
So these common problems, slow speech, grammar mistakes, wrong words, and nervousness, often come from translating in the mind instead of thinking directly in English.
But don't worry, these problems can be fixed. In fact, today's podcast will help you understand how to overcome these issues by training your brain to think in English.
That's right. We'll share practical tips and exercises soon to help you speak more naturally and confidently. Julia, now that we've talked about the problems with translating, let's explore why it's actually so important to think in English when you speak.
Yes, Jason. Thinking in English helps your brain get used to the language naturally. When you think directly in English, you don't have to pause and translate, so your speaking becomes faster and smoother.
That's a great point. Also, thinking in English helps improve your fluency. Fluency means speaking without hesitation or too many pauses, and that happens when your brain processes English thoughts directly.
Exactly. It's like training your brain to work in English mode. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, and eventually it feels natural.
There's also a cognitive benefit. When you think in English, you're strengthening your ability to understand and produce the language more effectively. Your brain creates direct connections between ideas and English words, skipping the translation step.
And this can also improve your listening skills because when you think in English, you're more used to the natural flow and patterns of the language.
Good point. Plus, thinking in English boosts your confidence. When you speak without mentally translating, you feel more relaxed and in control of the conversation.
And don't forget, thinking in English helps you sound more natural and less robotic. Your sentences flow better because you're not stuck switching back and forth between languages.
That's why teachers and experts often say the key to speaking well is to train yourself to think in English, not just memorize grammar or vocabulary.
So in summary, thinking in English helps with fluency, listening, confidence, and sounding natural. It's really the foundation of good spoken English.
All right, Julia. Now that we know why thinking in English is so important, let's get practical. How can learners start practicing this skill every day?
Great question, Jason. The first step is to change your mindset. Stop trying to translate every sentence. Instead, try to focus on the meaning and picture it in your mind in English.
Yes. For example, when you see something, try to say it in English right away. If you're drinking coffee, think, "I am drinking coffee," instead of translating it from your language.
Another great practice is to talk to yourself in English. It might feel strange at first, but it helps your brain get used to forming thoughts in English naturally.
Exactly. You can describe what you're doing, what you're planning to do, or even how you feel. For example, "Now I am writing an email," or "I feel happy today."
Also, try to use English in your daily life as much as possible. Label objects around your house with English words, or write simple notes to yourself in English.
Good tip! Another very effective exercise is to think in English when you plan your day or make decisions. Instead of thinking, "What should I eat?" in your native language and then translating, think it directly in English.
And don't worry about making mistakes. The goal is to get used to the process of thinking in English, not to be perfect right away.
Absolutely. Another way to practice is to listen to English podcasts, watch movies, or read books in English. This helps you get used to English patterns and phrases, so you can start thinking like a native speaker.
A very powerful exercise is to pause during listening or reading and try to predict what comes next in English. This trains your brain to stay active in English rather than translating mentally.
Also, try to practice speaking regularly, even if it's just a few minutes a day. You can practice with friends, tutors, or even record yourself speaking on a topic.
And remember, it takes time and patience. The more you practice thinking in English, the more natural it will become.
To sum up, here are some key steps. Change your mindset, talk to yourself, use English daily, listen and read actively, and practice speaking regularly.
If you build these habits, speaking like a thinker, not a translator, will become easier every day.
Julia, it's always inspiring to hear real stories. Do you have any examples of learners who improved by thinking in English instead of translating?
Absolutely, Jason. I remember a student I worked with named Maria. She was a Spanish speaker who always translated in her head before speaking. At first, her speech was slow and awkward.
What changed for her?
She started practicing thinking directly in English every day, talking to herself, labeling objects, and trying to form thoughts in English. Within a few months, her fluency improved dramatically. She was able to speak more confidently and naturally.
That's amazing. Do you have any other examples?
Yes, another learner, Ahmed from Egypt, shared that once he stopped translating word by word, he felt less nervous during conversations. He said it felt like his brain finally switched on in English, and he could understand and respond faster.
I love that switched on in English. It shows how mindset really changes everything.
Exactly. These examples show that it's not just about learning grammar or vocabulary, it's about training your brain to think in the language itself.
And these changes don't happen overnight. But with consistent practice, anyone can get there.
So if you're listening and struggling with translating in your head, remember Maria and Ahmed. Their stories prove that thinking in English is possible and powerful.
Julia, let's show our listeners how thinking in English works in a real conversation. Are you ready for a quick role play?
Absolutely, Jason. Let's keep it simple and natural.
Okay, imagine you're at a coffee shop and I'm the barista. Instead of translating in your head, just think and speak directly in English.
Got it. Hi, can I get a cup of coffee, please?
Sure. What kind of coffee would you like?
I'd like a latte, please. And can I have it with almond milk?
Of course. Anything else?
No, that's all, thank you.
See? When you think in English, conversations flow smoothly and naturally.
Exactly. No need to pause or translate. Just listen, think, and respond in English.
Listeners, try practicing short dialogues like this daily to train your brain. Julia, before we wrap up, let's share a quick tip for our listeners who want to start thinking in English today.
Sure. My tip is start small. Don't try to think in full sentences right away. Begin by naming things around you in English or thinking about simple actions like I'm eating or I'm walking.
That's a great tip. Little steps add up. And remember, practice daily, even just a few minutes, can make a big difference.
Exactly. Keep practicing and soon thinking in English will feel natural.
Thanks for joining us today on the English Learning Podcast. We hope you found these tips helpful for speaking like a thinker, not a translator.
Don't forget to practice thinking in English every day. It really makes a difference.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Also, leave your questions or comments below. We love hearing from you.
See you next time. Keep practicing and speaking confidently.